Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Straight Talking Leadership with me, Chris Pienkowski. As you know, these interview segments that I do called My Journey are really for the purpose of me having conversations with interesting people, them sharing their leadership journey, all for the purpose of you gathering a few nuggets of information that you can apply in your life, in your career, and in all things around what you do. So today's guest is Pat DeVincentis. Did I say that right, Pat?
Right on the head.
Awesome. And I'm kind of embarrassed by that because I've known Pat for a long time. But Pat he's in the tech space. He's held roles like, lead, senior agent, supervisor. He's currently working his way up the food chain to become a software engineer. And he's worked on some of the largest websites, e-commerce platforms on the globe. In addition to that, Pat is a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. He's the lead instructor for the Future Champs Kids program, as well as the lead instructor for the BJJ Fundamentals program at Grindhouse MMA and Fitness. So, Pat, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you having me. I know you have some pretty awesome guests lined up, so it's definitely a privilege to be on here with you. I appreciate you having me.
Pat, when you first mentioned it to me, I was like, you know what, this could be a great opportunity because, yes, the other guests, I've been talking to people that are like over the hump in their career, right? They've been in a leadership position for a really long time, but I really think that this could bring some perspective from someone who's on the upswing of their leadership career, right? So some of the things that I want to get into today is, what are you looking for in the leaders that you work for? What are the things that you embody as a leader? But before we get into all of that conversation, one thing that I like to do before we get started is a quick mental warm up that I call the Mad Minute. The Mad Minute has nothing to do with leadership at all. It's me asking a couple questions that we're just going to warm up the mental muscle and get us into a groove.
Cool.
So you ready for the Mad Minute?
I'm ready for the Mad Minute. Let's do it.
All right. So you just found out that you are a superhuman. What is the one superpower that you would want?
Flying, man. No more traffic. Can go anywhere. Can leave a minute before I have to be at the gym and get there on time. That'd be great. Definitely flying.
All right. So flying would be your superpower.
For sure.
Question number 2. You're out for a walk and you come to a fork in the road. To the right, the path on the right is 12 gorillas, but they're the size of squirrels.
Okay.
The path to the left is one squirrel, but it's the size of a gorilla. You cannot turn back. Which path do you go down?
Oh my! Are the gorillas as strong as normal gorillas or as strong as squirrels?
They're squirrel-sized gorillas.
I'm taking the 12 squirrels or the 12 gorillas the size of squirrels, man. I'm not really too fond of a gorilla-sized squirrel. That sounds terrifying.
But see, my thought here is that squirrels are typically skittish, right? So if you make like a sudden move, even a gorilla-sized squirrel might turn and run.
Yeah, they're skittish at us because we're huge. Are they skittish at, worms? Probably not. So it would probably see me as a worm, and I'm not into getting eaten. So I'm gonna take the 12 gorilla-sized squirrels. So or squirrel-sized gorillas. Sorry.
There you go. All right. Well, thanks for playing along, Pat. I always just like to do that to kind of break the ice and get things warmed up.
That was a tough one. That took me a second to think about. Wow. I'm still that one's gonna torture me until tomorrow. Probably. I'm gonna probably change my mind and text you about it. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Sounds good to me. So, Pat, you're in the tech space. You're young in your career. What are the things that you have seen so far that you're like, man, that person is an awesome leader and there are some characteristics that I want to emulate of theirs.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, really, the number one, and the one that I really try to strive for myself personally, not just at work, but I try to take it into aspects of, every aspect of my life, is just leading by example, man. Um, when I was at, I guess I don't want to call it my first real job, but it was my first job at like a pretty like big company. The boss that we had gone out on maternity leave, and someone who's a really good friend of mine took over the position in the interim. And the way he's my age, and he was my age at the time, so we were like 22, 23 years old. And the way he stepped into the role and led by example, and was leading a team of people, of all people older than us, and was really able to own that, was something that I try to do with everything I do. That's definitely number one. So leading by example for sure. Um, and the other thing is time management, man. Something that I'm still really, really working on. But the really, really good leaders that I've worked under and that I've tried to learn from, they typically have really good systems of what they're trying to get done in a day, usually a checklist of what they're trying to do, and they try to keep everything nice and organized. So those are the two really, really big ones that I try to strive for personally.
So leading by example and managing your time.
Yes, sir.
Two super important skills and traits to have. Let's let's take the flip side. Have you worked for someone who you're like, I can't believe this person is leading other people? And
Oh my gosh, haven't we all? Haven't we all
we
at some
have,
point or another?
because there are unfortunately plenty of bad leaders out there.
Yeah, there definitely are, and this is where one of the one of the memes that I see on everywhere I go that I follow about leadership. There's always this meme, and I'm sure you've seen it, where it's a bunch of people pulling like a carriage, and the guy is in the back yelling, and he's
Yep.
he's the boss, and then the next one down is the leader at the front, like kind of pulling him along and like saying, "Let's go." And I've definitely had a boss that was supposed to be a leader, where we would get told what to do, and then the biggest complaint that I had was micromanaging, where I'd be into doing something and they would come along and kind of, insert themselves into it, or, it was almost like they didn't trust me to do my job. And it wasn't just me, it was everybody on the team. They did it with everybody, and it was a really, really big complaint. Ironically, it was a similar like kind of situation where a friend of mine eventually stepped in and kind of took over, and I saw what a real leader could be like. But yeah, micromanaging, in my opinion, is the worst trait you can have as a leader. I'm not saying there's not times where you need to step in and kind of take the role if things aren't going the right way, but you
Sure.
definitely have to have trust in your people to do what they have to get done. And then if things don't get done, step in and solve those issues when they come. But micromanaging is just the worst thing that you can do, in my personal opinion.
You're absolutely right. And for me, so in the work that I do, um, I help people become high impact leaders. And there are five principles to high impact leadership. And the fifth is decentralized decision making.
Hmm.
So it's really about, providing your team with what are their limits of authority, making sure that they're clear on their goals, and then letting them go, right? Trusting your team to
Hmm.
get the job done, and then trusting that they need to be involved in. But otherwise, like, let your folks rock and roll. Let's let's stick on the micromanagement for a second,
Sure.
because I completely agree that that's the worst way to manage and lead people. What does that do from a morale standpoint when your leader wants to be involved in everything you do?
So I kind of touched on it a little bit when I was, mentioning earlier. It just diminishes the mindset of the whole team. Like I said, it wasn't just me. It was the entire team. No matter what we did, somehow that person was involved. So a bunch of thoughts kind of go through your head. Like, one, am I doing something wrong? Because, like, why don't you trust me? But two, and this, I'm only speaking for myself personally for this one, because I can't speak to how other people feel. But I've always been kind of a go getter. Like, I'm always thinking about the next step. Okay, I'm doing this, and eventually I want to get to here, and then from here I want to go here. Kind of, I always tell the kids, working up the rungs on a ladder.
Mhm.
Um, And what that mindset, what that micromanaging kind of lack of skill, I guess I'll say, would do, would kind of instill in my brain like I'm never going to get there. Like you're always either touching something or doing it for me, or you have to be involved. Like if you can't trust me to do even the simplest tasks on my own, how am I ever going to get to a position where you're trusting me to eventually lead other people to do their tasks on their own? So again, I got kind of lucky where the person that was micromanaging so much left for a while, and someone stepped in who I wasn't friends with at the time, but eventually became good friends with, and they saw that I had drive and the ability to do things on my own, and they gave me a bunch of responsibility, and that's kind of where my I guess I'll say leadership journey really started. But if you're micromanaging your team, you might I'm gonna be honest, we had people quit. We had people, on the spot, like come in and just say, "That's it, I can't do it anymore," and walk out. And I'll be honest, like I was there a couple times myself. So if you're micromanaging your team, I suggest you recognize it in yourself and try to fix it as soon as you can.
Would you say that a leader who micromanages is that's the root cause of that is because they're not confident in themselves or their ability, combination of the 2?
So I've thought about this a lot. I think a couple of things can happen. I think you can be in a leadership role, and maybe it was your first leadership role, or you were in a role, and a couple of times it's happened to you where you gave people responsibilities and they messed it up really bad. And as the leader, that comes back on you, no matter what way you cut it.
Right.
So I think that can definitely happen. And the other thing, and this sounds selfish, but I definitely think it like goes across people's minds is, Chris, you're working under me. I'm doing this task. I'm going to give it to you. Well, what if you do it better than me? you know and we're all human, we all have that mindset. So I definitely think those two are the big ones that play parts in why people feel the need that they can jump in, or have to jump in and like touch everything somehow, because at the end of the day, you and I are working for Ben. We bring it to Ben, and no matter what, you can say you touched it somehow, or I can say I touched it somehow. I was a part of it, so I get some of the credit. So I think it's a lot of selfishness, if I'm being totally honest, I think personally.
I I totally agree. And one of the things that, in my opinion and my experience, really sets apart those high performing leaders, those good leaders that people want to work for, and the lower performing leaders is their ability to subordinate their ego
Hmm.
and actually, you know what? If I give you a project, Pat, and you knock it out of the park and you do it better than I could have done it,
Hmm.
you're getting the credit for that.
Yep.
And that is what a good leader does is when that next layer of leadership is reviewing the project and they say, "Hey, good job, Chris." What I'm going to say is, "You know what? It was Pat who really knocked us out of the park." So, good leaders really need to be, pumping their people up. And if especially if they see that they have skills that are better than theirs, more defined,
Completely.
or their ideas are better, you know what? Rock and roll with that. Because if I come to you, you and I are working together, and I say, Pat, we've got this issue, and this is what the end result needs to be. This is kind of what I think we should do, but what do you think? And if you give me your suggestion and it's in line with reaching that goal, but
Mhm.
it's not necessarily what my suggestion is, I'm
We
going to
both
let you
win.
have it all day long
Yep. Yep.
because now you've bought in. Now you're committed to it. And now you're going to do an even better job.
I agree. I completely agree with everything you just said, and I'm very, very blessed right now, in the position that I'm in, that my boss is exactly like that. I really, really enjoy the company I work for now, and you know, this is the first time I can ever really say that and mean it. Again, I'm young, but in my life where, um we have meetings, and even if I'm not in them, I'll hear, she brought something in that I did, and she mentioned my name when she said that like I deserve the credit for it. And what that does for me, in my position, is it makes me want to work so much harder, not even for the company, but like I want to make my boss look good now. Like I want to
Right.
work so much harder. I want to put those extra hours in. And it's a ripple effect. Like, okay, so I'm working so much harder now. She looks good. Like it's only going to open more doors for the two of us. Like everybody wins. Um versus, the opposite where if she went in there and she said, this was all me and I never got any credit for any work I ever did, my morale is going to go down the toilet. Like it's bound to happen, unfortunately. So I think it's very, very important as a leader that you um, give people credit where it's due. And on the opposite side, I'm sure you were going to touch this, is you have to take responsibility even when your people kind of mess up, and then, rope them back in and be like, hey, listen, I took this on the head for you, but here's where you messed up. We have to fix this next time. That's a big, big, big component of it.
That's right. And I'll take that a step further because yes, as a leader, we're responsible. The performance of our team falls on us, whether it's good or bad.
Yep.
The the kudos goes to the people who did the good work,
Hmm.
and when it's not so good, we take it on the chin. Because part of our job as a leader is to shield our people,
Sure.
right? We pump them up and then we shield them from the bad stuff.
Yep.
And what I like to do when I'm reviewing those things that went wrong is I'm always talking about what specifically went wrong and what can we do to prevent that going forward. Um, a lot of leaders like to give feedback, right? And feedback, I think, has a not a negative connotation,
I
right?
agree.
Oh, I'm gonna harp on something that went wrong here,
Hmm.
and I'm gonna kind of leave it in your hands to figure out how to fix it. As opposed to, I use a method called feed forward, where all right, we're gonna address what happened, but together you and I are gonna figure out how do we prevent it from happening again. I'm gonna take responsibility for making sure it doesn't happen again.
Sure.
But it's dynamic. It's addressing a situation and not harping on it. Where you harp on it is this is the solution
Yep.
moving forward.
Yeah, I completely agree. And again, I'll say, I'm blessed with where I'm at because my boss does something very similar where when something goes wrong, we don't harp on it. And when I first joined the team, the previous employers that I worked for, they would do the opposite. Like they would harp on the mistake constantly. It's all I heard about for, weeks at a time. Um, but with this current employer, my it's a very easy conversation. Hey, here's where we messed up. Here's where I messed up as your leader, not reminding you, not setting a calendar invite, not, whatever responsibility she can take, she does, which I always appreciate. And then as someone who takes leadership very seriously myself, I jump in. Well, I typically try to jump in, and I think that's important if you're trying to become a leader, is recognize where you messed up before you were even told where you kind of made a mistake. Okay, well, here's what I should have done better. X, Y, and Z. And yeah, it's always a conversation to have. There's a very negative connotation on criticism and feedback, and it doesn't always have to be negative. We're just trying to get better out here every day. So I think if you can go into any kind of situation like that and take that mindset with it, you can always self improve. So
Totally agree. And I know you and I joke about, you're a millennial
yeah,
and what are millennials like, right?
yeah,
I'm a Gen Xer. But a lot of times we like to joke about the sensitivity around millennials,
sure,
but it cuts in every generation, right? Feedback and criticism. I don't care if you're a boomer, Gen Xer like me. No one likes hearing that shit. And when it's coupled with, and this is how we're going to make it better, that takes
right,
the sting out of it.
yeah.
You know, you can't shy away from talking. You got to have tough conversations when you're a leader. That's part of the job. But the way that you go about it, the way that you frame it, it's not just the millennials that are sensitive about it.
I mean, I'm not gonna say my fellow millennials aren't a little more sensitive than other groups of people that I've come to encounter, but no, I completely agree. It's I mean in anything in life. I mean, I know we talked about jujitsu a little bit in the beginning. Like even that sometimes, like when I try to coach, like, hey, here's where you messed up, and as you know, my coaching strategy can be a little bit blunt sometimes. But when it gets down into the nitty gritty, it's like, here's where you messed up. Here's where we have to fix it. Because what in what way are we fixing anything by just saying, here's how you messed up? Like, okay, so what? Like, and a lot of times, what happens is people are afraid to ask, what's next or how do I fix it because you're coming at them with this criticism. They already know they messed up in most situations because you're calling them in for a meeting, or hey, we have to sit down, or hey, can you jump on this call? Those situations don't typically happen unless something's very, very good or very, very bad. So
Right.
I know me personally, when I get a Slack message and it's, hey, jump on the Zoom real quick, I'm like, oh God, what did I do?
Right.
So your anxiety is already kind of through the roof. So if you can come in with, hey, here's the situation that happened. Here's where I feel like I could have done better as a leader, but here's where, I don't want to say we need improvement from you, but here's where we could have done better as a team. XYZ. Well, you just as the person in the meeting taking the criticism, I feel like you leave with a much better taste in your mouth than, "Hey, you messed up. We have to fix this next time." I mean, who is that helping? So,
Yep. You just brought up something that you and I are both passionate about, which is jujitsu. It's how you and I know each other. Um, and I mean, we met when I first brought Ben to Grindhouse, in the kids program. And it seemed like at the time, the kids program was kind of restarting. I think that there were maybe a few kids prior, but it was really just getting started. And you've seen it all the way through, right? It's been 5 years that he's been training at jiu-jitsu at Grindhouse. Let's talk about what has been your role in the kids program, and how has that translated into your own leadership, and what do you take to work from the leadership that you have in the gym?
sure. First of all, great question. So the kids program started, I think like you said, I think it was about 6 years ago at this point. And they asked me to come on as the jujitsu instructor for the kids, and we started out with, I think it might have been just Ben at the time because like you said, we were restarting, so we'd have like one new kid come in and another new kid, and then. But for the most part, it was just Ben and like one or two other like steady kids, and we've grown a lot since then, and we have more kids to mold now. But um, my role specifically is just trying to get them as good at jujitsu as possible. And, as cliche as it sounds, I try to take it a step further and, make a little bit more of an impact in their outside lives. I mean, I know, with Ben specifically, we sit down and have conversations about school and home life and all that stuff.
Mhm.
And I feel like it all goes together. It's very, very important. But what I've taken from the kids class to like my work environment and things like that is um one, in order to explain anything to a kid, and I've been around kids my whole life but not necessarily as an instructor, things have to be broken down to the most minute detail possible. Because or you're gonna get the but why, or they won't ask anything and then they'll have no idea what you just said and then just do it wrong anyway.
Well, that's
um
the adult classes. We all sit around and just look at James, and we're like, "Yeah, we got it."
And that's what we were kind of talking about earlier, where people are afraid to ask questions. So that's what I've really, really, really tried to take not only into my adult fundamental classes. I mean, you've taken a few. I always ask, are there any questions? Don't feel weird asking. Stop me anytime. Feel free to ask. Um, but being that person that you want to make people feel comfortable coming to you and asking a question, and then when they ask a question being able to explain it not in this broad spectrum of like, here's what we're doing, okay, but why, what is this doing, what is that doing? And I don't want to get into specifics of like positions and moves in jiu-jitsu, but everything has a place, everything has a reason. If I'm grabbing a collar or I'm getting an underhook or I'm doing these things, it's all for a purpose. And I really try to take that into my everyday life, when not just at work, but with other things, is why are we doing what we're doing? There has to be a reason. I'm not to get too philosophical here, but when you're explaining a project to someone on a team, like, okay, here's what we're doing, here's why, here's how it's going to improve, our team, here's how it's going to improve customer service, here's how it's going to improve the company. At the end of the day, we're going to be better for it. They're going to be better for it, XYZ. And what it can do is really kind of open up not just excitement, but like that extra like energy to like actually want to do something. So I really try to take that into work, but again also into my personal life too.
What would you say is the correlation between jujitsu and leadership?
The correlation between jujitsu and leadership. I mean, so I really kind of started taking things away from it when I started to compete. So I think I was 22, 23. Um, and when I first started competing, I lost a lot. I mean, I was, I was a blue belt at the time, and I would go to tournaments, and I hadn't really competed at all before, and I would lose a lot. There was always something or somebody to blame. Well, my ankle hurt. Well, this guy was bigger. Well, he just kind of did this. He just kind of did that. I think the number one thing that you can take from jujitsu and apply it to, your leadership journey is, at the end of the day, no matter what the circumstances are, it's on you. You have to be the guy that's going to make things happen as the leader. Now, there's, you want to do it the right way. You don't want to just be, like, let's take jujitsu, for example. You don't want to just be an explosive maniac and go crazy. That's going to cause bad things. You want to be technical and methodical in your approaches of what you're trying to do. And I've that's really the number one thing that I've tried to take from jujitsu and apply to, especially in the tech space. Because in the tech space, if you're writing code and you make, you can. I've left a semicolon in a code block and it breaks everything. That's
Mhm.
just code for you. So you really want to be as analytical as possible in jujitsu and, kind of in your leadership journey.
I like it. I I'm always pulling nuggets from the mats and applying them to leadership situations because I think there are just so many. And, in addition to you training jujitsu,
Mhm.
you're also you like to stay in shape. You're into personal development. How does how does that stuff fit into your professional journey?
I mean, it all kind of comes together, right? Like, if you're doing certain things in one aspect of your life for growth, it's going to bleed into other aspects. That's what, and I'll give him a shout out. I'll give Sonny Roche a shout out on the podcast today. He's really, over the last 2 years, been like, I always tell people, he's the blueprint, man. So instead of speaking personally, I'm going to use his as an example, if that's okay. But he was
Absolutely.
he was like this goofy but like athletic, like kind of all over the place kid that was coming in and training, and like he was very, very, very like sporadic in his training, and like would train for like 2 days this week and then be gone for a month and then come in, and like, but he always had like something about him. So I don't know what happened or what flipped the switch in his head, man. But I mean, it, and anybody that's at Grindhouse MMA and fitness or moving arts knows it. The kid just hit another level over the last 2 years where he trains every day, he studies, he's doing the personal fitness, he lifts, he does strength and conditioning training, and now he's taken those into, I guess it would be what would be considered a leadership journey, but like he wants to start his own business. So eventually it'll bleed into other people, but right now it's just for him. But all that work ethic that it takes to make those strides, not only in jiu-jitsu but in personal fitness, that I can't stop kind of mentality, like, okay, I made a mistake, like, here's how I'm going to fix it, and like that drive to not ever hit a wall and stop. You can very, very, very clearly tell he's taken those things from what he's doing in his personal life, his personal growth, his personal fitness, and he's applying it to, what he wants to do. I'm not going to, talk about his personal business and what he wants to start, but the businesses that he wants to start,
Mhm.
the conversations that we have, you can just tell he has that go-getter attitude, and that it came from all that hard work that he's put in on his personal growth and personal fitness. So
Yeah. Sonny, I mean, I've definitely seen a transformation in him over the past couple years,
he's a different
and
man. He's literally is a different man. It's crazy.
he is. And he and I talk about business stuff too. And he's one of my favorite people to just like sit and talk with
Yep.
because he's got that energy, and even his energy from 2 years ago is different than
Totally
what it is
different.
now. But he also he embodies something that I think is crucial for leadership, and it's the way that you do one thing is the way that you do everything.
Yes.
So, that's the same if back in the day when I used to be in the real estate business and in construction, when you would go to and look inside some guy's truck and it was just a shit box inside of
Yep.
his truck,
Yep.
his work area was the same way.
Yep.
And I guarantee you that his house was the same way. And, but
And probably his personal life and
and
everything else. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Um, so to see that, like, I know how hard he trains, I know how focused he is, how dedicated he is. When you have the mindset of the way I do one thing is the way I do everything, that is a game changer in and of itself.
I completely agree with you, and I'm gonna touch on a couple different things here because you just sparked a couple thoughts in my head. But someone who really, on top of him, who really talks about that a lot, and I'm sure you follow him as well, as Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
He talks about that all the time, and one of the things that you know when I'm having, we all go through rough patches where like you're having a bad week or 2 weeks, and sometimes it bleeds into a month where you're not doing the things you should be doing, and you're not. And the one thing I love, love, love that he says is start by making your bed in the morning. Get up and make your bed. And as we all know, anyone who's gotten up and made their bed in the morning, or you're lucky enough to have, a partner at home that makes the bed so you come home to a made bed. It is so much better to come home to a made bed, to get into bed and just have it, the sheets are clean, you're comfortable, and it gets your day started off right. And if it starts a chain effect. Okay, I made my bed. Okay, now I'm gonna clean this. Now I'm gonna clean that. Now I'm gonna do this. Now I'm gonna get up, make my bed, and go to the gym. And it kind of starts that ripple effect of doing the things that you're supposed to be doing. So my one piece of advice, if you're ever falling on the ladder, start by making your bed. I love Jordan Peterson, but the one thing I really wanted to point out about Sonny, and the one thing I've really tried to embody over the last 2 years, because we all have egos, right? Like it just is what it is. We all do. The one thing that's super important for leader is knowing when, and we kind of touched on this earlier, when someone else is better at something and being open minded to learning. There are so many people that you'll meet in your life that they think they know it all, even when they don't, and they don't. And I've been there. I've been in the training room where I'm like, like whatever. Like I'm, certain people aren't here today. Like I'm the best guy in the room, and now somebody comes in and I should beat this guy, and now I'm getting caught with this crazy stuff that I've never seen.
Right.
And you have to be able to take the ego part out of it and sit down and ask questions. And again, I'll use Sonny as a perfect example. Great, great, great training partner recently has gotten very, very good at the leg lock system, and we sit down and we talk. He's if we were both in the room one day and we were teaching leg locks, like I'm the brown belt, he's a purple belt, but I would pass it off to him. Like he knows better than me today. Like that's his area of expertise over mine. And I've tried to also take that mindset into work as well. Like okay, like I know what's happening here kind of, but you're better at it than me. Let me pass it off. But don't just, hey, just do this. Sit, ask questions, learn, try to become a better person at whatever they're doing yourself so that you can help somebody in the future. So
Speaking of his leg lock game, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too much, but um, so I was training with one of his private students,
three guesses.
someone that I won't mention by name, who makes good cheesesteaks.
Yes, sir.
Um, he dove into a leg lock. I'm like, what the fuck is Sonny teaching you? Like,
Yeah. I was there. I think I was there that night, right?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, even that. So as a leader, if Sonny was there, he probably would have been smiling ear to ear, man.
right,
I
right.
mean, and that's I think that goes back to the difference between boss and leader that we were talking about earlier. And that's kind of a weird example to do the boss thing. But like I'll take Ben for example. Ben's one of my students, and I pick on him all the time, out of love, of course. But when I teach something and then I see him do it in the training room, like it makes me happy. Like you're taking what I've taught you and you're using it. Like I tell him all the time. I tell the kids all the time. Like I tell the adults all the time. We're in trouble in 10 years. Like I hope we get to a point where they're so much better than me that I'm the one asking them questions. They're diving into things, and that's the overall goal. I think there's a common misconception in leadership slash boss roles of being afraid of like people getting better than you at something. But again, it just opens more doors for everybody. So I think it's a super, super important quality to be able to pass things on and be happy for people when they do well with what you've given them.
That's the key. What you just said is to be happy, right? Yes, it's our job as leaders to give people the opportunity to be better than we are,
Hmm.
but the ability to be happy when that happens, that's a different frame of mind.
Agree.
Because there are some people, some leaders that'll just take that as like pride in me, like,
Hmm.
oh man, he just did what I taught him, so
Hmm.
therefore I must be awesome.
Hmm.
As opposed to, man, I'm so happy that he did what we've been working on and he executed it flawless.
Yep.
Like that that's a different shift by just a few degrees, but it makes all the difference in the world.
I completely agree. You're basically just taking jealousy out of it, and that's all it is. And
Yeah,
again, as humans, we're human. Sometimes jealousy kicks in. It is what it is. I say all the time, I'm completely jealous of Sonny. He's doing what I wish I would have done at 23, 24 years old. And when he was just starting to train really, really hard, we still train pretty frequently now, but like we trained a lot together when he started to take it seriously. And I tell people all the time, I'm so, so happy to see what he's doing. Like it genuinely brings me joy that he's taken in the few bits and pieces that he still uses from the game that I taught him or whatever, or helped him learn. And I'm seeing that in his matches. And again, he's rising to another level that most people won't ever see. But just as an example, because jujitsu is the easy thing that I can relate it to. It genuinely, and the same thing with Ben. Like when he goes out and he does well, it genuinely brings me so much joy that these people are doing things that I taught them, but for them, not like in an egotistical way. Like, I'm happy you're taking this and doing what I know you could do the whole time. Now take it to the next level. And that's a really important mindset to have, I think.
it is. Another mindset to have is how to deal with failure as a leader. Do you have any times that your leadership or something you were doing with others didn't work out the way that you expected? And what did you learn from it?
So again, I'm pretty young in every aspect that you can think of, right? In my career, even in really like teaching jujitsu and things of that nature. Like I've been doing it for a long time, but yeah, for sure. I think I don't want to give specific examples, but I think the most
Sure.
important thing you can learn as a leader is not everybody's the same. You know, maybe you and I can sit down in a conversation and I can say, "Chris, you fucked up. What the hell? What'd you do?" And I know you, so I know you can take that on the chin, not take it personally, and we can have an honest, good conversation about what you did wrong or what we did wrong or what the situation was, blah 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 blah. And that's the type of person you are. Whereas I'll just use Ben as an example, just for fun. If I
Yeah.
said that to Ben and he broke down in tears, now, we're not going to get anywhere because the second that emotion gets involved in the conversation, things become very, very, very hard. Um, so, again, I'm pretty well, not, I don't want to say well known, but pretty adept to the blunt approach. And I've learned in my personal life, in work, and through jujitsu, honestly, because some people just don't really react that way. Um, that is not always the best approach, and you have to, as a leader, it's your, I guess, job to learn your people and learn kind of what best fits you. Now, I'm not saying you have to cater to everyone's needs and this at the third. Sometimes some people just aren't cut for the cloth, and that's also an important thing to recognize. Is maybe you're just not cut out for this. It's very, very important, especially at work, to realize like maybe this person just isn't for our team. Very, very important. But there's trials and tribulations to go through before that. Maybe I'm just not talking to them the right way. Maybe we have to approach it a different way. Maybe, we have something called like a PIP where, it's like a performance improvement plan.
Mhm.
And there's a bunch of different things that you can go through. And honestly, it really opened me up with the kids because, I'll call him out. Ben specifically, I can talk to in certain ways, and I know we're gonna be okay. Like he's not really gonna let emotion get involved. Whereas other kids, hey man, is everything okay? Everything okay at school? We have to have like really like casual, good conversation and kind of build up that trust to the point that maybe we can have that conversation like that one day, but definitely not right now. So recognizing your people is super important.
Yeah, and that's a good point. That's where the emotional intelligence aspect of leadership comes into play.
I completely, yeah, exactly.
What would you say what would you say your leadership philosophy is?
Oh gosh, I don't even know how to answer that question. Um, my leadership philosophy. Um, I I guess I kind of touched on this earlier. I guess my philosophy has always been lead by example.
Mhm.
Um, and I sometimes I don't do the greatest job of it. Um, so lead by example and recognize when you're not, and try to fix it immediately. Because everybody wants someone, you know not to sound cliche or anything like that, but especially with like young boys and young men, like everybody's looking for someone to look up to. Like it just is what it is. And if you have a leader that you can look up to, not just at work, but in your personal life, where and I have a couple in my life, and I'm very, very, very thankful for it. Where I see what they do, and I see when they fall off the not off the wagon, but off the ride a little bit, and
Mhm.
I see how they kind of get themselves grouped back together and get back on and continue the job. It's just it's very, very important that people see that, in my opinion, and can recognize that, okay, well, if you're the person I look up to and you're doing it, I can do it. So leading by example, 100%.
Who are the people that inspire you to be a good leader?
Um, gosh. So my brother for sure is a big one. So my brother is 12 years older than I am, 13 years older than I am, I think, something around there. But he just I just frequently just recently like sat down and had like a conversation with him about this, where he's just the person that is willing to help anyone, anytime, anywhere. Will take the shirt off his back for anyone, and the way he handles he works a very stressful job. He comes home, his wife's a stay-at-home mom, so he provides for everybody. He does what he has to do, and then he's, taking his kids and doing everything he has to do, and he's in sales at work, and he's like the guy at work. So I know he's stressed, and the way he handles all that pressure, and still, man, we talk every day. Text me every day. Good morning. How you doing? Is there anything I can do to help? Yada yada yada. And the way he just approaches being a leader at work as a leader in his personal life. And I'll give you an example that's a little bit dark, but not too bad. Lately, my last year, my mom passed away, so she
Mhm.
was the first person in my life that I ever like that I can remember that I it really hit me that she lost or we lost. So we walk into the hospital and everyone's crying and I'm in shambles and he comes in, you know, big smile, hugging everybody, does we do what we have to do, and no one would even have known that like he was like really really sad. And I found out through channels later that like he definitely didn't he was handling it really really hard, but he knew he had to be the rock for everybody else in that room, and I really really appreciated that. And later on when another grandparent of mine passed and he wasn't in the room, I tried to be that guy. I walked in and I tried to be that person that was trying to, hold everybody up and, "Hey, it's okay, like, this is for the better, da da da." So, number 1 for sure, my brother.
Awesome. Who else?
At work, so my first, mm, I'm gonna say second real boss. I know that sounds kinda weird, but I worked some pretty finicky jobs when I was working. I've been working since I was 14. And I won't say his name, but just the way he approached almost everything, and he's the one that really got me, locked into time management. So, I'm diagnosed ADHD, and time management has always been a struggle of mine. And he gave me some tips and tricks to kinda help me out, and he was very, open to the idea that things that work for him didn't work for everybody, so he gave me, like, a bunch of tips and tricks. And then similarly to my current boss now, when I did a project or I worked on a project and I did most of the work, I got most of the credit. It was never, "Yeah, we did this," or "I did all this," da 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 da. It was always we went into a meeting, and even if I wasn't supposed to be on the meeting, he'd bring me into the call with, like, the CEO and the higher ups and, like, introduce me to these people or, introduce me to the room and say, "He did most of the work on this, he deserves most of the credit." And that was again, that was my first, like, real job, and it really opened up my eyes to the type of leader that I wanted to be if and when I ever got into that role. Where if I messed up, he took it on the chin for me, and then we had a conversation, and when I did a good job, I knew I did a good job because he was not shy about telling people that I was the one that did a good job, and I try to really take that into work as well.
All right. So, last question, and then we'll start to wrap it up. I know you're busy. If there was some advice that you could give to someone who's more senior and they're working with folks that are up and coming, what's the advice that you would give that person or those people that could help them to be better leaders of the next generation of leaders?
it's gonna sound kind of cliche and maybe a little cringy, but be patient. Like patience is so, so, so important. And I'm sure you can vouch for this, but the amount of times that I've been in situations when I'm in like the higher up role or the leader role where I'm very, very close to losing my patience. It's up there on the scale of amount of times that it's happened. But recognizing that you were there too, and you're they're young and they're trying to figure it out, and it's stressful. And if you can recognize that they're driven and they're really trying to rise up, that there's bumps and bruises along the way where they're going to make mistakes. Not everything has to be end all be all, and that's part of your job as the leader is to guide them through those things. So that would definitely be the number one piece of advice that I can give because I think as leaders that sometimes we kind of and I'll take this more so from like a jujitsu perspective, you kind of expect people to just get it sometimes where you kind of tell them something, you kind of just expect them to just get it. And that's I'm not even going to say not always, more often than not the case. Most people don't learn that way. They have to have things broken down and they have to do it once or twice or two or three times to experience it. And that goes with everything. That goes with, you know, talking to people and like in leadership what's the word I'm looking for? Not
Like
areas,
peer groups,
environments. Yeah, in
environment.
leadership
Yep.
environments when you're trying to talk to a room full of people, that's a skill. And I think statistically, public speaking is like the number one fear for most people.
Yeah.
So being able to guide people through those things, like if you're having a meeting, like prepare them for a couple weeks and let them take one part of the meeting where I'm going to talk all this, and I just want you to say this little part, and then I'll take back over. Like it's okay, but all those little steps that to build people up into the best leaders they can be always usually involve patience, so just be patient with your people.
That's a great note to end on because a lot of times when people get to that certain level of leadership, they have a hard time thinking back to what it was like 20 years ago
Yep,
and what were some of the things that they were going through and just how important a little bit of patience can go. Like, you know, just an ounce of patience is worth like a pound of effort.
I agree.
So I think that's an awesome piece of advice for those more senior people that are going to be watching this. Be patient with the folks that you're trying to raise up into the leadership ranks.
Especially if
Recognize,
they're millennials, be extra patient, don't forget.
be extra patient with the millennials. Um, if they're Gen Zs, I mean, Gen Z is before millennial, right?
I don't. I think after what's your son? Is he Gen Z or Gen? I don't know. What's after millennial? Let's find out. Isn't the internet great?
It is.
Uh, so it follows Generation Z from 95 to 2009. So yeah, Gen Z. Gen Z
Okay.
is after.
So, well, we'll just go broad because Gen X is like the best living generation, and we're tougher than everyone else.
Yeah, of
So if
course.
you're if you're talking to anyone who's not Gen X, got to be a little more
Yeah,
patient.
be a little patient. But no, I mean, you'll also just build like a certain amount of trust. I mean, who wants to go into a meeting with somebody that's always going to bite their head off? No, nobody does.
No,
Nobody ever wants to. Again, talked about, and I don't mean to ramble on, but I used to have a boss where if I got a Teams meeting or a Teams call, like or a Teams link, I just knew before I even got on the call they were gonna be screaming. And it's like you don't ever want someone on your team to have that mindset. Like I don't want to answer this call because Pat's gonna be screaming at me. Oh, like, okay, here's what happened, here's what's going on, or whatever the situation is. Um, but like I mean, we already harped on it a lot, but just be patient with your people.
yeah,
People are going to make mistakes, and it's important to recognize that and help them through those mistakes. And one mistake does not a leader not make. So
that's right. So, well, Pat, this has been an awesome show. I really had a good time. I think that we uncovered some things that'll be helpful for folks that are kind of starting their leadership journey, as well as people that are kind of at the tail end and they're helping to mentor future leaders. So, I'm really happy that we had a chance to sit down, have this conversation, and that you're able to make some time and come on the show. I appreciate it.
I agree, man. Thank you so much. Like I said, I know you have some really awesome guests lined up, so it was an absolute pleasure to be welcome onto the show, Chris. Thanks a lot.
Oh, no, this is awesome. So everyone out there who's watching, if you got some nuggets of information, if you got some just tidbits that you're able to apply to your life, please do it. Share the show, subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Share this with other people that you think it would be helpful for, and stick around for more content coming next week. And between now and then, lead on.